This is Marley Preston, here with you today to talk to you about all the things that you are wrong about. If you have a trigger, we will pull it. We will be shouting from the deepest depths of your ill contentment. You are on the wrong side of history. Today's guests include, from the Dark Light Divide podcast, Willow Van Helsing. And from the deepest depths of obscurity, Christopher Bigford. Today's subject is gun rights. Now, gun rights is something close to my heart. As a gun owner and as a believer in personal freedoms, I believe in the right of a person to defend themselves, their loved ones, and their property. This seems like a no-brainer to me, but to many, it is not. There's still an ongoing argument about this that's been going on for decades, and I can't say I completely understand, but I have a theory that might explain a bit people's stances on gun rights and why so many people are against that idea in varying degrees. They might not have been raised around guns, but even more so, I think the more salient point is that it's completely psychological, not intellectual at all, because you present intellectual arguments to them and they knock them down with emotions. Never mind the fact that most of these mass shootings are done in gun-free zones. It's just something about guns. Guns are just scary. Perhaps the best thing you can do for a friend that is anti-gun is to take them to the firing range, and perhaps they'll learn to enjoy themselves with that. I keep a loaded shotgun by my bed. I don't think that's insane. I think that's caution. If somebody breaks into my house, then I would like to have the right to defend myself. I don't know what their intentions are. So this is very much a no-brainer to me. I realize that the other two guests here actually are very close to my opinion on this, but I'm sure we'll have entertaining discussion on the subject anyways. Now, I have two people here from completely different backgrounds concerning guns. And I'm going to start with one background, being someone who was raised around guns, Christopher Bigford. So, what's your experience with guns? Do they make you uncomfortable? Do they make you feel more comfortable? And why? I mean, you being raised around guns certainly would affect the way you feel about them, yes?
Well, absolutely. I think what you take into consideration in a lot of cases with a lot of different people, I should say, if you were raised around guns, if you've always been around guns, you tend to not be afraid of them because you have a more comfortable understanding of them. I mean, the reality of it is one end is dangerous and the rest of it's not, but for some reason people see a gun and they immediately have fear, which I understand. I mean, even if you've never been in the military, you know, if ever handled a gun even, you've seen movies and, you know, guns kill people, absolutely. But it really does come down to how they're handled, how they're treated. Obviously, it's like anything. You treat it with respect. A knife in your kitchen, obviously you're not going to grab it by the blade and start swinging it around, not, you know, if you have any sense whatsoever. And a gun is exactly the same way. And it comes back to the same thing. I'm very comfortable around guns. I own I used to own more, but I own a gun still. And I see them as a tool, you know, just like a hammer or a knife or a drill. I mean, and it's very important, you know, let me say it this way, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
I've seen a lot in liberal circles because Willow and I actually have a similar background concerning guns because we both come from a background that is not very gun-oriented. In my family, they weren't anti-gun, but guns weren't around, and that there was a little bit of, you know, naturally, usually it's women saying that that I don't feel comfortable around guns and things like that. But for the most part, there was not any sort of problem uh, with guns or any enthusiasm for guns either. I was interested in guns because I like the idea of being able to defend myself, and I've been fucked with before. And I think we all have been fucked with. But there's always somebody stronger than you. I mean, it's nice to have a gun. You, Willow, have actually come from a background that's very similar to mine in the sense that there has been no guns in your background. Is that correct?
Yes, no guns. Guns are bad, McKay.
Well, how did? Yeah, but
Sorry. No, in all seriousness, that's how I was raised.
but was it like a gun neutral kind of thing, or were they actually anti-gun?
No, they were anti-gun, and it's interesting
Did they give
because
you any reasons for that?
well, I don't know. It's interesting. My dad works in law, and I won't say specifically what he does, but he's not a cop, but he has an option of whether to carry a gun or not, and he did for a while. But then he chose not to, and he doesn't like guns, and my mother hates guns.
Do you think that this disliking or discomfort around guns or under the subject of guns comes from this lack of dealing with them?
Yeah, and just seeing. I think that my parents both are kind of one-sided in how they see things, and my dad works with criminals. My dad works with people who are currently in jail for gun crimes, and he works with a lot of gang members. So he sees that side, and it's not like we're down south where everybody has a gun and everybody's informed about guns.
Well, this actually brings me to another point about guns and gun ownership. I mean, you have a lot of people with gun crimes in jail, but I mean, these people, I mean, do they actually think that a gun law being passed, I mean, like a gangster's going to be like, well, I was going to buy that gun, but it's illegal. I mean, like, who really thinks that? I mean, anybody in the room want to say a thing or two about that?
Yeah, I'll chime in on this one. Okay. Well, she was saying the South, and I guess for all intents and purposes, I'm from the South. So, and I will say people are far more comfortable with guns there. It's been my experience than they are in a city like we're in now up north. I mean, we're in Syracuse, and I never realized this when I was younger because I grew up in New York. I just grew up in the country.
The younger part of your life was New York.
Yeah. No,
Not,
yeah.
not your adult life.
No,
was
no.
very southern, actually.
Yeah, my adult life was Southern. And people are pretty comfortable. I mean, you won't meet a lot of people who are afraid of guns to the degree where they don't want in their home because they're scared. Obviously, anyone's afraid of a gun. If someone pulls it on them on the street, they're going to be concerned at the very least. But at the same time, you're going to be more comfortable if you have access to a gun and someone pulls another one on you. You're going to feel safer walking down the street with a gun. So I would say in the South, well, I can't say that it's educated on guns, like in the safety sense. I mean, there's a great deal of people who have them, in the back of their truck, on the, with the rebel flag, which is absurd. But I would say they're definitely far more comfortable with them in the South.
Willow actually had some experience. She said she had sort of that quote unquote road to Damascus like realization epiphany going from the whole anti-gun liberal standpoint to geez, I wish I had a gun and I knew how to own and operate it. You want to tell us about your transition between your sort of lefty liberal anti-gun scared of guns kind of shit? I mean, like maybe driven by the media, maybe it's shit you saw on TV, and plus shit you heard from your parents or friends or whatever.
Sure. I am not really. It was very quick because I was actually assaulted with a gun. I know what the barrel of a gun tastes like, and it wasn't my hand that was on the other end of it. It wasn't like a, you know, but
In neither situation would that be good.
right. You see on the news and in the media, all these shootings and all of these terrible things that are happening with guns. So you have the association, guns bad, guns kill innocent people, and it's true. It's an overused phrase maybe, but guns don't kill people. People kill people, and stupid people kill innocent people. When I was in the circumstance where I could not defend myself, and I thought that I was going to die right then and there, that changed everything for me. And it was right after that I learned how to operate a gun. I went to a gun range down south with a friend, and I would feel more confident now that I've fired one.
Right, and that makes complete sense, actually. I mean, being in New York and being from upstate New York, I mean, there's a lot of country around here. I mean, if you're not from New York State, then most people seem to think that it's all one slab of pavement. Like, you're in Syracuse? Oh my God, I'd love to come visit you. I bet you're like 15 minutes from Brooklyn. It's like, no, it's like 4 hours away. I mean, we have apples here, people. I mean, do you think we grow our apples in Manhattan? I mean, we're known for our wine. Can you picture like a wine vineyard in fucking Brooklyn? I mean, come on. There's a lot of country here, and actually, Chris here has had a lot of experience in the upstate New York countryside, and I would imagine you find a lot of parallels between the upstate New York view on guns, the countryside, upstate New York view on guns, and the South. Is that right?
Actually, no. I mean, obviously there are some parallels, but in I'm from in Florida is where I lived, and I'll tell you, in cities, generally speaking, I didn't live in the country too much in Florida, which Florida has a lot of country folks, well, a lot of swamps, and there are people down there who hunt, but up here, guns do tend to, like in my experience, the people here who do have guns and enjoy guns and are not afraid of guns do tend to have a better understanding and a better appreciation for them, but they're vastly outnumbered by people who think if you own a gun, you're a serial killer, which is absolutely insane. I mean,
Everybody knows that an axe is more gratifying.
oh, or chainsaw.
Right.
Yeah, but which I do think
More to
there's-
clean up, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. It's messier, but and I've seen a lot of gun violence, firsthand, really all over the world. But the reality of it is in the South, people are not afraid of guns to the degree that they seem to be, here in the cities anyway. But here in the cities, it's different than the countries as well because, or, I'm sorry, in the country as well, because in the country you have people who've been hunting their entire lives. They're fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth generation of hunter. They go, they plan for it all year. It's like a holiday season. So it's a little different here, but
Well, I've noticed when I talk about the fact that I own guns and I'm a gun rights advocate, around here people are like, oh, do you hunt? And I'm like, nope. And they're like scared then. Like from that point, they're like so scared of me from that point because I don't hunt. Why do you have guns? It must be to kill people. Like, it's not like most of my guns are, I don't know, at least 50 years old and they're kind of pretty and wooden.
well, that's the thing. I mean, something that people should take into consideration is guns. Not all of them, of course, but many guns are very beautiful. I mean, really and truly. I mean, I'm actually sitting here looking at a really nice oak one right now, with a nice oak button. I mean, and I can understand people having it in their homes just because they're
Yeah, and
nice
that's a muzzle loader. I mean, it takes like like what 40 seconds to load the damn thing.
Yeah,
to
if you-
fire one round.
Right. This is not an assault rifle. Not that I have a problem with assault rifles either. I mean, we tend to forget that the reason the Constitution has gun rights in it is not to protect us from people invading our homes necessarily, as much as protect us from tyranny of our own government.
Which would sort of imply that we need to have the right to own military grade weapons, which is actually even a lot of the gun rights people think that I'm going too far on that. What's your point? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I have no issue at all. I think it'd be a great idea if every home had a gun safe in it with assault rifles, personally. I mean,
Well, one thing we have to remember is an assault rifle is a government term. It's just arbitrarily named an assault rifle. And a lot of we have something in New York State that's called the SAFE Act, and they actually have outlawed guns just basically because they look intimidating and they're black and
oh,
you know,
and they're loud. Can't forget the loud thing. People, for some
guns are
reason.
loud, but there are guns that are legal and they're louder.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of it has to do with that psychological intimidation shit.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that what's really important with guns is okay. If you're a home that if you live in a home where everyone's anti-gun, you have every right to feel that way. And for your sake, I really hope that no one decides to break into your house.
I really hope they
because-
do actually, but I'm a bad person, so
Stop. Well, because I don't want to see you and your family's bodies on the news. But
I don't want to see your families because they don't deserve it, but it would be your fault in my opinion.
Well, not necessarily. I can't say I completely agree with that because even if you do have guns, people can break in and kill you. But
Certainly, but in a lot of cases it's their fault.
well,
For being pussies, come on.
absolutely.
Really?
Oh well, I'm not saying that. I
I
think.
mean, what do you think? How would you feel about America just repealing the Second Amendment?
Oh, I think that would be an absolute disgusting injustice. But there's nothing wrong with the way things, the way things are supposed to be. The government doesn't need to have their hands in everything we do. I mean, the truth of it is, when it comes right down to it, I believe they want to eliminate guns so that they don't have any more competition than they need to. I mean,
Well, yeah, the government has the monopoly of force, and if they'd have more of a monopoly of force, like a total monopoly of force, they have an almost monopoly of force, is where they would have a complete one if nobody had any guns. But, I mean, that's only if you could get rid of them, which is also not plausible either.
oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing.
They said, well, they did it in England. I mean, England is the size of an American state, and I don't mean Texas. I mean like a small American state.
Well, absolutely, and they didn't really get rid of them. They made them illegal, but you can still attain guns anywhere. Because when it comes right down to it, if you make something illegal, that'll just give more of a market for it illegally. I mean, the black market obviously is not full of things you can buy at the gas station. It's full of things that are illegal. So when you
Yeah,
ban
the
something,
occasional black market cigarettes in New York because they're so fucking expensive, and the black market shit's actually cheaper. But I don't know if that's going on anymore. But a few years back, I heard about that. But I don't want to get off subject. But yeah, you were going.
yeah, I do believe it still is, but just the same. I mean, the thing about criminals is, criminals know how to break the law. That's kind of what they do. And so when you make guns illegal, all you're really saying is that the people who don't want to break the law won't have guns.
Or you'll turn people who were not criminals into criminals, because there are certainly some people that would consider themselves some pretty harsh patriots that will not give up their guns, and they don't give a shit if they're labeled criminals after that, because the government is being criminal and trying to fucking chip away at the Second Amendment.
Right.
The Second Amendment, I mean, what protects our First Amendment?
Not much. That's the thing. Right now, you've got small militias and things like that, and I don't mean these crazy, nutty militias that are just out to, purify the world, but I'm talking about militias in small towns. Like my town here in New York has a militia that is actually established specifically for catastrophes. If our government, for example,
What do you mean, like a miniature FEMA kind of thing? Or?
but with guns. I mean, FEMA's really great, and then they do that too. If there's a catastrophe in the sense that like in the South we'd have a flood or a hurricane, but here they're prepared for example, if the government decides to, like if our president decides to declare martial law and things all go, well, extremely fascist or whatever, they want to be ready for it. Or, if the government completely collapses, they want to be able to protect their homes, which they absolutely should have every right to do. And personally, I think it's a great idea.
I think that brings me to the subject of gun registration, and I think the reason why in New York State I don't want to own any handguns is because you have to register them, and I don't want the government to have any record of me particularly owning guns. I mean, that's grounds for confiscation in the future. It's been done in other countries, many other countries actually.
I'm sure. Well, what was it? I know what it was. Is Red Dawn, old movie from the '80s. They actually, when we're invaded
The
by,
remake was pretty good too.
well, yes, but the original is my point. They actually, this small town is invaded, first thing they do is get a registry of all the guns, even the rifles from the actual gun shop, so that they can track these guns down and take them away. And I'm sure in many cases in the movie kill people over them. But yeah, I definitely think that guns are a personal thing and should be treated as such. I think if you are not a felon, and even felons, I think in many cases should have the right to own
You mean
a
like
gun.
non-violent felons?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you had a
Intent to sell pot. I mean, come on, that's
yes,
nothing.
no, absolutely. But I think that it's silly when it comes right down to it. A gun is a few pieces of metal and wood, and not even always wood, but generally it's always metal. I mean, what right does anyone have to say you can't own that?
Right. I mean, in a lot of these acts of mass shootings and some acts of domestic and foreign terrorism, actually, they happen in these gun-free zones, particularly with the mass shootings, not so much with the foreign terrorism thing,
sure.
because that's like more military bases. But it happens there, and recently I heard something about like pipe bombs. I'm like, oh, it was a gun-free zone. You should have said it was a pipe bomb-free zone as well.
Well, that's the thing about those gun-free zones. I think they're just begging for it. You're going to tell everybody that there's no guns here.
Well, you know my house. I mean, I got signs all over my house basically saying, if you break into my house, I'm going to kill you with my gun. Or I'm at least going to attempt to do so, which has deterred people from breaking into my house. Because we live in a neighborhood that's pretty decent, but it's really close to a bad neighborhood, like all the good neighborhoods in Syracuse are.
They know that hasn't completely worked. And
Well,
she's,
yeah, but they actually broke in on the side of the house that had no sign.
right, that's what I was about to say. There are gun, we will shoot you signs on the front and the back of this house. But someone still felt the need to break into the side of the house. Of all the houses in the neighborhood, this
The
is
dumbest to break into. Yeah.
right. And not to mention the fact that this is not the fanciest house on the street. It's
And it's one of the smallest ones on the
right.
street.
And on top of that, we were here. Like my car was here.
dumb.
Yes, it's absolute
Syracuse
absurdity. But I mean, people are still going to be stupid, and I think what's
Yeah,
important
and
is
I want to actually go on with that story because when I was sleeping in bed and somebody came in, like you heard a noise, and I said, "Go down there," and he took the gun down there, and I said, "You got to cock it," and then by the time he got down here, the guy was fucking booking out the fucking window, and I think that it's pretty safe to assume that that positively identifiable sound is a deterrent for that.
well, and I think that's true. See, I might as well tell the actual story. So it's late at night, and we're upstairs on the second floor. There's a one bedroom up there. Like I said, it's a small house. So there's just one room upstairs. That's the entire upstairs, and it's, gosh, I want to say it was 2 in the morning ish, and I hear a noise which I couldn't completely tell what it was, but I figured better check it out. And I woke her up to tell her just in case. Because, if I go down there and there's something going on, I want someone upstairs with a phone. So we go downstairs, or I go downstairs with the, what did I guess, yeah, I had the 12 gauge pump. and not really thinking anything, because who's going to break into a house with signs on the front and the back? And if you saw the neighborhood and the fact that this is not one of the nicest houses on the street, there are much nicer houses that are just as accessible. Come into the living room, and there's a small room off the living room, and go to start walking around. I turn the light on, and as I walk around the, we'll say, coffee table, it's actually a piano stool, but the coffee table, I see a figure bolting out the window, just a shadowy figure, and one of the guns off the walls, a collectible gun at that, not even a something of, it would have very little street value. It would be something people would just trade for drugs, maybe.
Well, it's a $700 gun, but not in the black market.
Right, absolutely. It's not an assault rifle or a handgun or anything that you would really go. You wouldn't go rob somebody with this gun, but unless you were really desperate. But see them bolting off through the window. It blew me away, because of all the houses, this one. But I still say this: I'm quite glad that we had guns here in the house, because if it had turned into something, it wouldn't have lasted very long.
Right, and I do think that it was actually the sound of the cocking of the gun more so than anything else, because he had no time from the time you flicking on the switch to get out the window. So it was definitely the cocking of the gun. Thank you. You also said that it was sort of a shock when we were talking about trying to get a handgun in this state was so much red tape and everything. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely. That is one thing I will say. There's a few things, but that it's different in the South. Like in Florida, it's a much easier process. I mean, you walk into a pawn shop or an actual gun and ammo shop, you can pick out your gun right there. Now, I mean, there is a waiting period, but it's not much at all. It goes very quick. They run a very basic background check. But as it's explained to me, it's a whole huge process here. I have not bought a handgun in this state yet. And the reality of it is, I probably wouldn't buy one in this state. I'd probably buy it somewhere else and just bring it back, which I know is illegal, but it just feels much safer to me to do it that way. I think that it just amazes me how many guns are
it on a podcast.
Absolutely. Well, freedom of speech and all, and let's just hope that doesn't bite me in the ass.
lying.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I'm just saying that it's not true. But I mean, we can also have assault rifles, and I mean, like the AR-15s, very popular assault rifle across the country here, and I mean, if you ever see one, this is not a terribly scary looking gun. It's really not. It's a rifle, more or less. So when people tell me, "Oh, well, those are banned here," it just surprises me. I think it's actually just very ridiculous.
There's a lot of anti-gun shit going on up here in New York State. That's the common opinion held, is that guns should either be completely illegal, yes, completely illegal, rest of the country, you people out there. I'm sure you people in Europe think that's rational, but, nobody's perfect. But this must be a cultural shock for you, because this is very old hat to me. The whole anti-gun shit. I mean, when you encounter, because you're well traveled. I mean, when you talk to people about the gun rights and everything, and they disagreed with you and you disagreed with them. Was this in Europe mostly, or was this actually in this country?
No. That was. I've never had anything like that. This is all here. I actually know. I had a conversation with one guy in Florida, someone I knew, that was telling me how dangerous guns are. And when you start having a conversation with these people, it's funny, because you realize how, and this is an awful word to use, but I'm going to use it anyway, ignorant they really are to how guns are. I mean, I have actually met someone, and I'm hoping this is a very limited case, just there's not that many people like this, but that believed having a gun, it had to be kept in a gun safe if you have a gun, because who knows, it could just go off and kill somebody through the walls.
Oh, no, I've heard that a lot. And these obviously are people who have no sense of what a gun's function is and what it does. Guns don't fire themselves. I mean, that really is sort of an opinion like guns are bad. If you really believe they just go off by themselves, which is absolutely ridiculous. And if you out there think that, you're fucking stupid. You're stupid, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Certainly not very well informed. A gun, in its case, first off, if you just have a gun in your home and you don't actually plan on eating it, maybe you got it and thought someday I'd go to the range and shoot it, odds are you're not going to keep it loaded. Plus, I would hope it's in a case just to keep it safe, to keep it protected from,
Even if it
scratches.
was loaded, it's not going to go off.
Well, this
by
is where I'm
itself.
going with this. Guns do not just discharge randomly. It's insane. There's a whole mechanism behind it. That's like saying my car is going to just start up and drive away.
It is a lot like that, actually.
But that's not going to happen. I couldn't even begin to fathom what the odds of something like that happening. I think it's probably just as likely as your car driving away while parked in your driveway. But although, new cars, new technology, you never know, maybe more likely.
Yeah, but even that would require a remote or something.
Yeah.
And well, what about this? This is actually something I wanted to touch on too. Is in this state and a lot of other liberal states, they want to make semi-autos illegal. And I think a lot of this has to do with misinformation and people being, as you said, ignorant about the function of guns. People confuse semi-automatic with full automatic. Full automatic, which means it sprays bullets like, like Rambo kind of guns. That's full auto. And those have been illegal in the United States for private citizens, except for those with very specialized licenses that are like damn near impossible to get. They've been basically illegal for the common citizen since the 1930s. So if you didn't know that, take that on board. Let that marinate in your empty little head for a while.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, people, truly, I think the reasonable way to look at guns is, from my point of view, is if people want them, they should be able to have them, obviously. I do think that it's a good idea, and I'm not saying this is something that should be regulated by the government, that if you're going to have a gun, you should, as a responsible adult, because I don't believe any child should have a gun without parental assistance, have the knowledge to properly maintain and care for it, and how to treat it with respect and safety. I mean, obviously, a gun, it's not a good idea to get drunk and take your gun out, shooting bottles out in the street, things of that nature. That's just irresponsible.
You get drunk and you shoot bottles out in the country.
Oh, yeah, much better idea. You don't have stray bullets. Now, the odds of that are pretty slim, which is actually something I wanted to go into real quick, too. It's kind of funny. People think that if you take a gun and shoot it straight up at the sky, that it's funny because as a kid I remember a game with arrows like this, that it can come back down and hit you, okay? But it's important to be clear, that's not how it works. Once it gets up there, it loses its momentum in the top, in the sky, and then it slowly, obviously it's going to go faster as it gets going, but falls back to the ground. Guns can be dangerous if you shoot them off. Oh, I've got a field at my house and I'm going to shoot out into the field. It's a good idea to have something to know. You want to know where that bullet's going to hit one way or the other. And that's one of those things that's just a matter of responsible ownership.
Also, I regret to inform the audience that Willow Van Helsing has left the building because she had something she had to tend to. So the remainder of this podcast will be just myself, Marley Preston, and Christopher Bigford. So if that's okay with you, continuing.
And even if not, there's really nothing you can do about it.
But sorry, people, for jumping around a little bit, but there's so much I wanted to cover and so much that I'm hoping pops in my mind before this podcast runs out of time. And one of those things is a common argument that I hear a lot for gun regulation is that the founders didn't know that we would have such powerful firearms, and the firearms back then were muzzle loaders, and maybe everybody should have the right to own a muzzle loader. Now, Chris, how do you feel about that? Don't you think that that's sort of a stupid argument? Like, it's sort of analogous to saying, well, we never knew how big the media would be, so the freedom of press, maybe that should be regulated a little bit.
Well, yeah, I absolutely think that's yeah. The thing about that is yeah, people like to say, oh, well, they didn't know that we were going to have better guns than muskets and rifles. Absolutely, but why would they care? I mean, ultimately, why does it matter that we have better guns? These were not stupid people. They had to figure that technology is going to progress. I mean, it's just irrelevant when it comes right down to it. It doesn't mean anything. So we have better guns. So what?
And I think that goes back to the point you were making earlier, is that it was meant to protect us from the tyranny of government. So we would have to advance our guns with military grade guns, no matter how powerful they become. And no, I don't think that individuals should own H bombs and atom bombs, but preferably in a perfect world. I know that's not the case, but in a perfect world, nuclear weapons wouldn't be an option. I think nuclear weapons are fucked up, and the amount of power they have behind them is enough to destroy all of humanity. So you don't trust the individual, but you'll trust a giant system that has a bunch of powerful people in it, and we're forgetting the fact that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we're leaving this technology in the hands exclusively of people who are the easiest to corrupt, and what people are drawn to such positions of power, but people who thirst for power. And we can't trust people who thirst for power.
Actually, something to take into consideration for people who are saying, oh, well, our forefathers didn't know we'd have automatic assault rifles, and sure, they didn't know was a fact. I'm sure they had some idea how much better the weapons would get, because even in their time they could see a progression in weapon technology. But the idea was that our government, we would have the ability to stand up and fight tyranny within our own government. So technically, seeing as how we don't have the ability to attain some of the weapons that the military has, I mean, I don't know anywhere to go buy a 50 caliber machine gun that I can mount on the roof of my car. But our government does, so we're actually ill-equipped now to deal with our government if they decide, if we decide to rise up against the tyranny of it all. So I think the reality of it is, if the government gets to have these big weapons, so should we. We should have full access just the same. I mean, based on that.
And going back to the point that you said about the founding fathers knowing the progression of things and the progression of humanity, that would coincide with the progression of weaponry. I mean, they knew that first there was a spear and then there was a sword, and they moved to the muzzle loader gun. So reason would stand that they knew that eventually we would have more advanced weapons. I mean, you think Benjamin Franklin, a man who discovered electricity, invented the bifocals and the Franklin stove and the lightning rod, who read John Locke and Tacitus, didn't know that we were going to advance? Seriously? Most of these people were men of science and philosophy. I think they had some foresight. I mean, do you think that our technology is going to stay exactly the same as it is now in 500 years? Of course you don't.
Well, something interesting here that I'm actually reading as we sit here, which is actually a fun fact. According to gunfacts.com, and the FBI apparently, an analysis of the FBI crime statistics found that the states that adopted concealed carry laws. Now these are where they can actually carry concealed weapons, so you don't know they have a gun, just the average citizen. Reduced crime. Murders went down 8.5%. Rape went down 5%. Aggravated assault went down 7%, and robberies went down 3%, which makes complete sense if you think about it, because if you're going to attempt to rape someone, and there's a chance they have a gun, I think that
That's gonna
probably
deter you, definitely.
Yes, that would definitely dissuade you. I mean, if you're sane, of course. But there's a great deal of facts here, and the actual great site for that is AmericaGunFacts.com, and it's very straightforward information with all the sources, and it's great. Actually, I really like this little site.
I have heard of states that actually make it easier to open carry than conceal carry, and there are other states where it's vice versa. But I actually think that if it was easy for anyone to have a concealed carry permit, then it would actually work to the benefit of even people who don't own guns. Because if there's a 50-50 chance, at least, of the person you're going to, rob or rape or mug or kill or whatever has a gun, then that would be a deterrent because you don't know. I mean, it's not in sight, right? I mean, what do you think? What is your idea, going off this subject, of reasonable gun regulation?
Reasonable gun regulation. I don't think that a child needs to own a gun. And by child, I mean when you reach the age. Obviously, if your parents own a gun and raise you with guns, it's your parents' gun. Now, it may be your gun in the sense that they bought it for you to use, and I support that completely, especially in situations where they're teaching children proper gun behavior, how to treat a gun with respect. I totally am about that. I even understand. I can't say that I completely agree or completely disagree with the whole felons thing. If you are a convicted felon, you can't own a gun. But because I can kind of see that go either way. But I think should be more along the lines: if you're convicted of a violent crime, then you can't own a gun if they're going to put regulations on it at all. And I do believe some regulations are okay. I'd rather us not need them, but some are okay. I actually got another interesting statistic to go along with this.
Same source, right?
Yeah, this is the same source. In 1982, Kennesaw, Georgia, passed a law requiring all the heads of households, that's basically the leader of the house, to have at least one firearm. Now, after they did that, residential burglary dropped 89%. Which is, I mean, just a massive drop. And even today, that law has been eliminated, even today, after having done that, the violent crime rate in Kennesaw, oh, I'm sorry, no, they didn't eliminate it. They still have it in effect. The crime rate in Kennesaw is still 85% lower than Georgia or the national average of violence.
Now here's some more fun facts from gunfacts.com.
All right, so what we have here is a comparison between police as a whole and armed citizens. Okay, now according to this, 794,300 police officers out there, or law enforcement officers of some kind with guns, versus 80 million armed citizens. So 80 million of us out there have guns, which is pretty impressive by itself. Now, what's kind of funny is, and I'm not sure actually how to read into this, but 11%, the police have an 11% error rate, mistakes, discharges, things like that. 11% versus armed citizens only 2%. Average deaths of a shooting rampage stopped by the police, 14.3. So I guess what they're saying is 14.3 average, mass shootings. Whereas versus armed citizens would be 2.3. Okay, but that's actually pretty good on the police's end, and they're trained and everything. Now, here's where it gets a little more interesting. Criminals killed each year by the police is 606. So 606 people are shot by police every year. Well, criminals, I don't know that that's counting people who shouldn't have been shot, but 606 anyway. Versus armed citizens is 1,527. Now, thing about that is the armed citizens, obviously there's a lot more of them, and so that's going to happen, but still, I mean, like any of the statistics you look at here, they did a Harvard study here not too long ago, and And Harvard, they actually determined that having guns, everyone having guns actually reduces the crime rate. I actually have those exact statistics here somewhere. Okay, what I've got here on the study that was done at Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy concluded there was a negative correlation between gun ownership and violent crimes. Now, what that means is the more guns we have, the less crime there seems to be, which in and of itself is kind of interesting because there's so many people that say, oh, well, the more guns, the more crime there's going to be with guns, when actually, statistically, we've proven that to be completely inaccurate and, well, just the opposite, in fact.
Well, thank you, Chris, for your interesting facts. I'm going to close with something heartfelt. And there's a group of people in the military who they call themselves oath keepers because they swear an oath to defend the Constitution, not just blindly and fascistly and totalitarianly follow orders. And my hat's off to you guys. May you guys live long in our hearts and memories and help us fight against
mothers and fathers dragged from their homes. You are complicit. You thought they gave you everything, but you forgot your freedom. All is lost at last. You defeat us. Blood is on your blood is on your This is what you wanted. This is what you got. This is what you deserve. This is what we deserve. You made your bed, now sleep in it. Die in it!